Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Black Advancement Book Club. I am Ajimanja Sante Goodman, and I will be hosting today's discussion, which is going to be on Animal Farm, chapters 5 through 8. If you're following along with us, this is a part of our Book of the Month series where we've picked a couple of books to really do a deep dive in and analyze and discuss into further detail from that list. That list can be found, of course, on the website, which is blackadvancement.com under the Books of the Month section. Now, with that being said, we left off after chapter 4, where Napoleon and Snowball were still kind of discussing uh, plans for the future of Animal Farm, and it seemed to me like Snowball was more for the people, and Napoleon was more so not. It also seemed like Snowball was coming up with a lot of ideas. One of the things that came to me was the idea of one doing propaganda and one using like brute force and all that stuff, and the other one just kind of going off of the policies and politics of it in terms of them trying to prove their point when they were at least when they were combating each other. Those were the two different tacks that were taken on. What did you guys think of that whole go back and forth between Snowball and Napoleon?
I think you were spot on with that.
Yes.
There was definitely a lot of propaganda going on from Napoleon's side, a lot of bullying, a lot of, dare I say, immaturity. You hear about him, kind of snorting his snout or whatever, whatever the name of a pig's nose is, at some of Snowball's ideas. And a lot of that, I think, spawned out of his jealousy of Snowball's thoughtfulness, his brilliance. He was a visionary. Snowball was a
Mhm.
visionary. Like you said, he had a lot of ideas. And I think because he was a visionary, because he had those ideas, he was much more into servant leadership. It was about the community. It was about the people all rising together. Napoleon, as we find out, you know, throughout the chapters that we're going to go over, he's not really about that at all.
Yeah.
Right, and his way of getting back at Snowball it was to deny that he thought his idea was good and not kind of downplay him, and make him seem like he wasn't as smart and intelligent as he was, and and basically after that we learned that he'll come up and he'll say, "Well, it was my idea in the first place," even though he's benefiting off of Snowball's brilliance. Um, he would just say like it's my idea so people were like so the animals could kind of see like well it was all in his plan, he was just kind of playing to show that Snowball is not really worth it and he could be ran off with fear and intimidation.
Yeah, another thing that kind of rang out to me when they were doing these sessions was sometimes when they would go to the back and they would privatize the sessions, as far as like some of the conversations that were being had, like where it was just the pigs. And it kind of it felt elitist a little bit. And then it kind of felt like after a while, like they didn't really have discussions in front of the other animals. They just kind of had discussions with each other. And the thing that I wrote down two things when I was reading it. It was suspended Congress, so to speak. And then I wrote down a quote from the book where it says, "Bravery is not enough. Loyalty and obedience is more important." Like that kind of attitude. What did that spark, do you think, in terms of like in the atmosphere of the Animal Farm afterwards, T?
It sparked the beginning of, I'll say, the budding dictatorship. The
Mhm.
basically the separation. I think the word that you used was elitist, right? Once they started setting themselves apart, it it becomes a lot easier to enact. I guess I'll call them laws and activities that you know you don't have to participate in or you're not going to be harmed from. It's a lot easier to do those things when you separate yourself from others. The
Hmm.
suffering that they're going to endure based on your decisions, you don't really have to deal with that when you set yourself apart. You saw that more and more in these chapters. They just kept on putting in more and more insulation between them and everybody else. And they started behaving more and more like we do, right? Like humans, picking up human vices and everything else. So I think that the community, even though their memories are short anyone who's reading this will definitely notice that. Um, they still notice that they are being placed in a different class than the pigs.
Yeah, I noticed that he started doing it after Snowball too. That's when they started meeting in private. Like kind of TJ said, Snowball was really for the animals, or and there was no secrets between them. And when Napoleon took over, it became secrets, and then they had them more in the sense of servitude as opposed to partnership. And you mentioned the thing about loyalty. Um, is better than bravery. And I think a lot of them were being more loyal to Napoleon, not in his leadership, because they weren't allowed to think for themselves. And they were put on with the attitude of servitude. And then, like a lot of the one thing that I noticed as I was reading, they were serving, even though the conditions were harsh, they were still in those positions with happiness. You know, none of them felt a sense of like he had a lot of their trust and a lot of their faith. They did not believe that he would steer them wrong. So I think in that sense, loyalty in this case is serve, or you be loyal and serve me, versus what Snowball was. His character contradicted that loyalty. He was brave and he was for the people and he had a mind of his own. And because he was such a free thinker, you couldn't have free thinkers because his ultimate scheme was to rule. And you can't be a free thinker. Um, you can't, I don't know if you can't be a free thinker and serve at the same time, but at least you can't be a free thinker. You have to be loyal to me in order for me to be able to control you. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to control.
The quote also speaks to the idea of what Snowball and Napoleon did in the Battle of Cowshed, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
From the standpoint of no, Snowball kind of galvanized everybody during that standoff back in chapter 4 and rushed forward even though he had gotten wounded. And I think that everybody knew that. And despite them having terrible memories, as TJ said, you will find out when you're reading the book, everybody knew that one up and down because he was, I think, given a medal and all this other stuff. And he was just no, he was lauded for his bravery. And that's why they tried to take away the idea of bravery and more so went towards loyalty when they finally ran off Snowball within the ranks of everybody at the animal farm. But I'm going to get back to something that Shanice said, and I'm going to have her go into it again. And this is a theme that um especially comes up over and over again in Animal Farm, at least as I was reading it. And that is the idea of pride versus foolish pride. Like, so you brought up the idea of the animals doing harsher work, harder work, while seemingly still being very, very not only trusting of the process, but trusting of their leadership, trusting of the pigs and what they were doing. And despite it being more difficult and more work, they were doing it proudly because they were doing it for themselves. And the question oftentimes just becomes like, is that pride or foolish pride? Shanice, what did you think?
I think it was more other than Friday. I think it was more of control, um, because I think that they wanted some sense of control, and because they weren't under the human leadership, they will be able. They was like it's like they would fall for anything because they're like, well, we want this freedom so much that we're willing to do whatever it takes, regardless of if it's sacrificing ourselves and as long as we don't have to go under that rulership again. Um, and in that sense of that being prideful and I don't want to fall again, not realizing you're falling. Um, and I think they were blinded more so by the sense of this type of freedom that they can get on their own versus that human freedom. And so they did everything happily in the sense of, well, at least I'm doing it on my own. And that sense of pride is blinding. It's blinding because you're not able to see the reality of things. You're so like, "Ooh, I'm doing this by myself. I'm doing this on my own." You're not able to see like you're being fooled again. It's just like you're going into one bad situation into another that's worse, but because you feel like you have some sort of say in it because the person looks like you or is in this, in this, I'm trying to think, yep, I'll use look like you, yes, because because the person looks like you don't see it the same. Or the animal looks like they were animals, so they didn't see it the same. Well, this animal will not deceive me because this animal is an animal like me. So they have to believe the same things that I believe, and I'm willing to sacrifice everything for that. And I'm foolish in the sense of I can't see past as I'm blind to anything else because they don't have the face of the human.
It's an interesting question, the pride versus foolish pride. Um, I honestly, the way that I think about what happened to them or what is happening to them right now, they're, I think that in the beginning, because they were no worse off than they were before, they were accepting of everything. They're like, okay, well, all right, I mean, we've got enough food, we've got enough of this, we don't have the Joneses to, on our back. I mean, yeah, maybe the pigs, maybe they're a little uppity or whatever, but we're no worse off than we were before. And as they gradually started losing more and more freedoms and things and conditions gradually became worse, the way that I think Napoleon was able to mask some of that was through propaganda that we talked about earlier. So even though things were getting worse, they were being told something else, right?
Mhm.
Even the rules themselves, it's like, oh, well, I thought that was a rule. I thought we weren't supposed to be drinking. I thought we weren't supposed to be
Okay.
sleeping in beds, right? Things change, subtle changes. And before you know it, you're a slave again.
The things that I had written down, and I'll get into the other part of it in a second, was the changing of norms and truths to benefit the elites. And it's like doing that and breaking these norms in real time and changing stuff in real time, like the history of what happened and all of that. And the people not being able to hold them to account because they're too busy working. Again, they're too busy trying to make it, better. And they're living off of the line of, well, if Napoleon says it, then it must be true.
Mhm.
Because Napoleon is the one who led us to our freedom, so to speak. So it was which also is relatively not true if you really think about it. The other part that I had written down that I'll have us discuss is like the idea of them turning Snowball into the boogeyman, them using the dogs as enforcers, and them having this other pig break out kind of as a star, which is Squealer, who seems to be the propaganda master. Shanice, what did you feel about all these different things being thrown into the mix?
I think it's a mastermind of a person that's trying to become a dictator, honestly. Um, Fear and propaganda is what he threw at them and it was effective. And I was actually thinking about this like in terms of history as I was reading that part, as far as like so you need something to fear. And you can think about Black people back in the day. We needed a boogeyman. So what white people did, they created a boogeyman, doing everything to cause havoc in society. Therefore, I'm going to make you fear this person, and you can fall into the whole propaganda of everything that I said was not true, but is actually now it is true because it benefits me. All of that was that's all in a sense so that Napoleon and pigs could get control. So yeah, fear and propaganda was used to control, like as a form of control, because if you have somebody fearing something, um, they're less likely to rebel,
Yeah.
and you can do more wrong.
T.
Yeah, that's, I mean, nail on the head right there. I mean, as their moral fiber, I guess, continued to decay when they, like I said before, they started to really embrace all the same vices that humans embrace. Um, Now that you're on this pedestal, you have to do whatever you have to do to stay there, right? And that includes the propaganda, that includes rewriting of history, that includes um, a lack of equality that's being spread across the animals at that point. They're like, we are the elite, is basically what they said. So we should be able to have these certain things that you all do not.
Mhm.
Um, we're in charge. You do what we say, you'll be okay. Of course, because they have short memories and they are, I'll just say, easily fooled. They go along with it until it's far, far, far too late. Well, I know they
He-
had said he blew up the windmill.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
they
they
said that he had helped blow up the windmill, that he was part of Jones's men
Hmm.
when he ran off and all this other stuff.
He
And
ate
then
the corn, like he did a bunch of
yeah,
little things around the farm.
anytime something came up short, it was snowball. He just
yeah.
became the catch-all for everything. And it's like, there's a couple different ways where you can use the black plight within this. You can use the black plight as sometimes he's Snowball, where he's the person who is blamed for all the ills of society. You can use the black plight as in we're part of Animal Farm, and as long as we have our our way in terms of like black people, in terms of if we have a black leader, would we be so subservient to the idea of just having one of us in charge that we would do whatever we want? I think that history has shown that we won't do that, but it's just a bunch of different ways that you could spin.
Well, you can spin it to white leaders too.
And the last thing about fear, it it does put you in a situation where if you're constantly fearful, you're willing to give up your equality. You're willing to give up freedoms in the interest of security because you're afraid. So it's just another propaganda tactic that Napoleon and Squealer used to try to keep people in line and try to keep them oppressed, I guess is the right word for it.
Security over freedom is a definitely a fine line. It's a balance that is hard to maintain, and a lot of the countries dip into one aspect of it or the other. Chapter 7, where I had a couple of different notes, it was like, bad leadership, bad results. Basically, Napoleon, because of his leadership, things were falling apart, but he was able to keep things together more so by uh farming out, pardon the pun, some of their work that they had as far as crops to the people who they had perceived as their enemies. And of
Mm.
course, they used this to spin it another way. And this one again, they were sowing seeds of distrust within Animal Farm itself, making other people believe that they were part of all this. Oh, I stole this too. I did this too. I did that too. And then they, even during Jones's time, they were struck by how the brutality that was used to keep people in line. What did you guys think about chapter 7 when it came to this?
Yeah, I think chapter 7 marks when things started really taking a nosedive. I think their food shortages got a lot worse between chapters 6 and 7. Um, people started, or animals, I'm sorry, began getting like executed in public, public
Mhm.
executions and
Yes.
just all manner of craziness going on. The hens were even getting starved because they didn't want to do what they were being
Yes.
told about the egg production. And I think that was the chapter where the Animal Farm residents began to really understand, oh, we're afraid of this guy.
Hmm.
We are afraid of this pig. So now we're kind of stuck in a situation where might as well be the Joneses at this point.
Yeah, he tried to go after Boxer, and Boxer defended himself. But other than that, I mean, Shanice, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, that chapter was absolutely insane to me, because animals were just coming up and saying that, well, I did this, and they were just getting slaughtered, and it was such a it was disgusting, honestly. It was really disgusting because like the animals just watched it, and it sounded like it just felt like they were hopeless and they couldn't do anything about it. And I didn't understand why people would, I mean, why the animals was just one after one coming up and saying things after
Volunteering
they
to get
see,
killed.
yeah, after
Yeah.
they saw you just got killed for this. Now why are you? It's like it didn't make any sense to me. I don't know if they thought eventually it will come out after they saw the animals being torn to shreds by the dogs. Like I don't, like, I don't know. But it was just like, why are you volunteering to get yourself? Are you moderating, or why are you becoming a moderator, and for what cause?
Yeah, maybe just because. But I mean, like it was just it was very witch trialsy. Was
Yeah,
what I thought
I
of
agree.
when I was
I
reading it. I
agree.
was like, the hysteria kind of thing, the madness of it kind of took over, and people was like, "Well, I did it too," and it's like, "Oh,"
Yeah.
but to your point, I'm not sure why they thought there would be a different result when they did it as opposed to admitting something. That didn't make much sense to me personally, but hysteria is it leads down to another road. Like we said, chapter 7 was wild, but I'm gonna digress from that, and we're gonna move on to the final chapter that we're responsible for tonight, which is chapter 8. There was a lot of things that really became apparent. One of the things that stuck out to me that I wanted us to discuss was the role of Benjamin and who he was supposed to represent in society. So, for people who don't know, Benjamin is the goat, literally, in this case, um, who didn't really participate in anything. He never had anything to say. He kind of was like, what happened yesterday is gonna happen tomorrow. What happened tomorrow is gonna happen yesterday. He was very melancholy, never had anything positive to say, never did more than what he was asked to do. Was great friends with Boxer, but I mean, who do you guys think that he's supposed to represent in the society in terms of for this book?
I would say, I think he probably represents a lot of people in the sense of no matter what, because you got people that don't vote still, and they'll say, "Well, it doesn't. If I don't vote, it really doesn't make a difference. I'm not really making a change because things are going to be the same regardless." And so there's a lot of people in society like that that just go along with the ride, and they're not. They're like, well, they're hopeless in the sense of they don't believe in any political system and anything could change. Everything's just gonna run its course. So they're just I would say they're just bystanders, not the actors in those situations. I
Hmm.
think he represents a bystander, someone just watching and not taking action on anything, because of either hopelessness in a sense of no matter what I do, it's not going to make a difference, or in a sense of just not caring. Like I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's just, as long as it doesn't affect me, I'm all right. So and there's multiple people like that, and so in that sense, he represents those people, the bystanders.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, maybe I'll say like the cynics and the disenfranchised. I
Yeah.
mean, he actually did, if I remember correctly, he did contribute a little bit here and there when they were, taking the stones up. So every so often you can kind of get them to move, but even while they're uh, conforming, I'll say, they're grumbling the whole time under their breath. It's like doing all this work, it ain't gonna make no difference in the end anyway. So
Mhm.
I think they represent that group, disenfranchised and cynics, which depending on the situation, could be a couple, could be the majority. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if more animals took his viewpoint as
Yeah.
things continue to spiral downwards like a flushing toilet. But anyway, that's what I think he represents.
Not to make this too existential, but also the thing that as most people know, Animal Farm was kind of loosely based on the Russian Revolution. And one of the things that I noticed is that even though this was supposed to be like a communist sort of system, inevitably it seemed like capitalism was rearing its head. At every turn, he started trading. The idea of production numbers being better than what they were, and having production numbers in the first place that would matter, bartering with people, using goods. I guess, and I think a lot of people don't think about the world like this. Do you think that capitalism is inevitable with the way that the world is set up now, or do you think that there is a better way of going about things when it comes to this?
This is a hard question to answer, especially living in America, um, because, anyone that is for the people, like saying like, oh, everybody should have this and we should, everyone like should have free healthcare. Everyone should do this. They're automatically classified as a socialist. And and then, attached to socialism is communism. And communism is seen in such a negative light. To say that, capitalism is inedible is in this country, I would think so, yes. Like, yeah, America is just a capitalist nation. That's how we become who we are. Um, but elsewhere, it might be, you might be able to have more of a socialist type of government where it's not as frowned upon. Because I think what our country is, people are selfish in a sense of they don't want everybody to have equal opportunities. That's why everything's set up the way it is. If that was the case, we had plenty of opportunities for people to be on equal footing. And when you have leadership like Napoleon that does like that elite want to have that elitist class, you have to have a capitalist system. Otherwise, be too, everybody can't, everybody would be happy and everyone would be, equal and we'll all have the same rights. And who wants that? We'll have a utopia. Who wants a utopia? We want problems. We want conflict. But in America, that's proven we don't want that. We don't desire that for our nation. We want the sense of elitism, this leadership that we have. And yeah, so I think it depends on the type of governmental structure you want.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, culturally, what is number one, is satisfaction possible for the individual?
Mhm.
And what does that look like? The second, a person wants more, step in capitalism, because
Mm.
that's the only way that you can get more than your fellow man. Um, so in that, or fellow animal or whatever, since we're talking about animal,
True.
but in that in that sense, I think it is inevitable. If there are ever any feelings that I should have more than the next person or cow or pig or
Mhm.
chicken, then inevitably you're going to do something to try to gain an advantage over them. And short of, well, never mind, there is no short of when it comes to Napoleon in this case. He is doing he's breaking every revolutionary rule
Mm.
um, without a second thought. You know, I could go down the list. He's drinking, he's talking to humans, he's trading with humans, he's rewriting history, he's created the boogeyman. He's got basically an army at his beck and call and behest that help him to spread this fear across everybody. So to ensure that he stays on top and that he can get more and more and more.
Speaking of that, this chapter, it's really it's as terrible as the seventh chapter was. This chapter was explosive and kind of shaping the future of Animal Farm, where they got into another big fight, another battle with the humans, and this time people died on both sides, and they blew up the windmill again. And I remember Squealer being like, "We can make more windmills, comrades. We can make more, right?" But it was just a point of like everything that they had fought for and tried to build had been, destroyed over and over again. And it's with the very same people who they were trading with. Um, and it was just the chapter 8, what I felt like was like a really explosive chapter. But anyway, we're about to close this out. I just want you guys to kind of give us your summation in terms of what you think is coming up next, and how do you think this whole thing is going to end when we finally close out our book review for Animal Farm.
Well, what I saw across these chapters was just complete corruption of the I guess I call it the ruling class. We saw a bunch of propaganda to control the truth and to change it on the fly. We saw, fear being used as a tool to control everybody. We saw the loss of equality and the loss of freedoms, and the betrayal of all the revolutionary principles and ideas, and the ousting and near assassination of the visionary that they had to carry them into the future. Things are at a fever pitch and they are sliding quickly downhill. My expectation is that that descent will continue with the same speed that we saw in these chapters.
Shanice.
I have to agree with TJ on this. I don't see anything getting better. I just think that Napoleon is gonna, continue with his propaganda. I don't know if they're gonna rebuild the windmill. My hope is, I would hope that the animals would see that they're not better off as as they were with the humans, and that they, overthrow Napoleon. But I doubt, because of all that has gone on and how they just basically fall um, subject to his whatever he says. I don't think that's going to happen. So I just fear it's just going to get worse, and then nothing they can do to make it better. Now they just have to go back, rebuilding, if they're going to rebuild the windmill, if they are going to continue down, we're going to work until we run ourselves to the ground, because eventually that's what they're going to do. All start falling off one by one. And then they won't have this utopia. They just have the hope of their freedom, freedom was lost as soon as they had bad leadership.
So my estimation and summation of everything that I think is going to happen was uh, given in something that happened within the 8th chapter, and that was the retirement plot that they had planned for all of the for the dead homies, so to speak, for all of the glorious dead animals. Well, not dead, but the ones that were basically put off the pasture, and they would die and dig with dignity and off in this plot, and they'd have twice the rations and all that stuff. That all of a sudden became a place where they were growing barley for beer. So in essence, it became a drug plot for them to be able to sell their illegal substances to other people. So that's that kind of summed up the whole thing for me. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you turn in again when we conclude our series on Animal Farm, when we do 8 through 10 and an overall rating of the book. Peace and advance.